Good evening, everyone. This is Hengis Siddhanta Smoochworth, and welcome to my channel. By the way, happy belated Thanksgiving to all of my listeners. The topic of this evening's video will be the recent headline grabber of net neutrality, or rather, its repeal. One side of this debate, seemingly the only side, is using a lot of heated rhetoric. The FCC member, that is to say the Federal Communications Commission member, Jessica, I might pronounce this incorrectly, Rosenworcel, has penned a fiercely and snarkily worded op-ed in the Los Angeles Times to protest the upcoming vote, which is styled as a repeal of net neutrality. She makes several interesting claims in this op-ed, which I will adumbrate and then later in the video elaborate on. First, she claims that net neutrality is, quote, the foundation of the open internet experience we all know. She also claims that net neutrality is the reason for America's internet economy being, quote, the envy of the world, end quote. Without net neutrality, broadband providers would carve internet access into fast and slow lanes. Providers could also choose which voices online to amplify and which to censor. Such a result is unacceptable, she claims, if decided by, quote, a few unelected FCC officials making such vast determinations about the future of the internet, end quote. And she mentions that the comment period has been rife with controversy for this new formal regulation, and on that point I will not quibble. Unlike her penultimate point, her final point is just as ridiculous as all the ones preceding it. And she believes that only the rich lobbyists and lawyers in Washington are in support of repealing net neutrality. The other Democratic member of the FCC, mind you, the FCC has 5 members, 3 of which are at all times of the president's party. Her name is Mignon L. Clyburn, and she has said that the potential repeal is, quote, a giveaway to the nation's largest communication companies at the expense of consumers and innovation. The slightly less prestigious website, The Verge, published an article about the cataclysmic side effects of repealing net neutrality. That net neutrality repeal is bad is axiomatic and deserving of paralipsis. The article states, quote, the downsides to this regulatory repeal are too numerous and too appalling to list, end quote. A Washington Post Bloomberg combination article equates net neutrality support with equality between Amazon and a suburban dad. With some remarkable candor, the article admits that net neutrality will not achieve equality, but it will help the little guy against the titans of that industry. Furthermore, the New York Times has said that, quote, big online companies like Google and Facebook say the repeal proposal would allow telecom companies to play favorites by charging customers for accessing some sites or by slowing speeds for others. There are numerous other articles from numerous other platforms that echo these and similar opinions. All of these points are either demonstrably false or willfully deceptive. Before I get into a point-by-point refutation, I'm going to sketch a brief legal history and legal context of the FCC's net neutrality order. So, a collection of medieval common law precedents coalesced in the 19th century under the term common carrier, or common carriage. These precedents limited the freedom of those who conduct business in transportation, and also rendered those who conduct such business liable to the people and the owner of those goods that they transport. Just to be clear, the transporters are called common carriers. In response to a new, powerful sort of transportation, namely the railroad, Congress codified and expanded these precedents in the 1887 Interstate Commerce Act. The act made railroads publish their rates and prohibited railroads from charging certain rates to favor certain customers or certain types of freight, regardless of bulk or the distance traveled. Right? Eventually, the ICC gained the power to control prices of railroads as well. Congress, in a large part, extended the principles of common carrier regulations to telecommunications in the 1934 Communications Act, which founded the FCC. Much later, when the term the Internet came into the common vernacular, Congress feared monopolies like a future AT&T of the Internet would arise, so they amended the Communications Act in 1996 to, quote, preserve the vibrant and competitive free market that presently exists for the Internet and other interactive computer services, unfettered by federal or state regulation." End quote. Thus, the 1996 Act bifurcated regulations. One track for telephone or telecommunication services, or Title II, and another track called Title I, or information services for Internet. Thus, the Internet was spared temporarily from medieval English shipping regulations and price controls. As the Internet switched from dial-up to cable, the FCC again had to decide whether to keep the new light touch Title I information service regulatory structure for broadband Internet, or to change it to the older, heavy-handed common carrier approach. The Supreme Court in 2005 decided in the case titled National Cable and Telecommunications Association versus Brand X Internet Services that the FCC was justified in continuing with Title I, that is, the light touch information service style regulations. The FCC, however, could still change its mind in the future. Despite the great efforts at expanding the regulatory power of the government over the Internet, the FCC pressed on for about another decade. It was not until 2015, as you may remember, that the FCC finally switched to Title II regulations under the guise of net neutrality. Recognizing that Title II regulations would do much more than achieve the narrow goal of so-called net neutrality, the FCC promised not to use many parts of their newly granted Title II powers. They would call this policy one of broad forbearance, and it means that the FCC will, for instance, not enforce 30 separate statutory provisions and 700 separate regulations, although they now have the power to do so. Students of American government might wonder why a federal bureau would give itself more power than it needed, because that's sort of exactly contrary to the American principle of government, which government has only the powers that it needs. The FCC had previously tried to get net neutrality through a series of other legal devices, none of which were successful. So Title II was their only option. Okay, that's a brief history and context for the FCC's net neutrality decision and what its repeal might mean. So now I want to go back to Jessica Rosenworcel's points in order. Number one, net neutrality is the foundation of the, quote, open internet experience we all know. This, as the brief history I just illustrated should show, is completely untrue. The internet of late 2015, when net neutrality went into effect, is not substantially different from the internet today, now that net neutrality is on its way out. I'd love to hear in the comments if any think that the internet of 2014 or earlier was somehow closed and it's gotten more open since. The pillars of the current internet predate the open internet mandate of 2015, so her comment here is really hard to understand in a sensical way. It seems to me pretty anachronistic. Her second point is that net neutrality made the American internet economy the envy of the world. However, Google, Twitter, Facebook, eBay, Amazon, PayPal, etc., all these enviable companies predate net neutrality, so again, this claim is anachronistic at best. Her third point is that without net neutrality, ISPs will, quote, carve the internet into fast and slow lanes. There's some truth to this, but prohibiting fast and slow lanes is a very narrow, rosy description of net neutrality. It also, for example, prohibits price differentials. For instance, the one act Obama's FCC pursued under their new net neutrality powers was to investigate so-called zero rating services. Zero rating is, according to TechCrunch, exempting certain streaming video and music services from data counts. Or more neutrally phrased, it's not charging customers for data used by certain apps. Right? Thus, giving some services away for free and not others violates net neutrality and is thus illegal. To borrow her metaphor, the situation is more of a freeway and a toll lane than fast and slow lanes. Trump's FCC has fortunately tossed out this investigation, so zero rating services are legal. An even superior metaphor is bundling. Imagine I'm shopping for cable television channels, and because of my linguistic disposition, I only want to watch Spanish TV. And in my region, there's only one cable provider. My options are thus to buy the cable bundle and receive 70-odd channels I will never watch, or go without cable altogether, or of course move to another location. So it is under net neutrality. ISPs are legally prohibited from crafting special packages to cater to certain internet usage. Some examples of what a different sort of internet package would be. Let's say T-Mobile and Google team up to offer free YouTube and Google Map usage for your smartphone. That would be illegal. Let's say Comcast offers a smart TV only plan that costs less than a regular internet package. That would be illegal. Or Xfinity offers a package that appeals to gamers by prioritizing gaming and to avoid lagging. That would be illegal. Another sound metaphor to explain this is what Senator Ted Cruz said. That's Obamacare for the internet. Just as Obamacare compelled insurance plans to include a suite of, quote, essential health benefits like maternity care, even though you're a man, whether the customer wished to pay for them or not. So net neutrality has a similar aspect. Her fourth point is without net neutrality, internet service providers, ISPs, could censor and amplify certain content. And this is true, but it's really only half the argument and not something that you would think a commissioner of the FCC, who is a supposed expert, would say. Right? So a foolish ISP could say, for instance, stop the streaming of pornography, and that one would probably go out of business quite promptly. An ISP could also force a user to prove one's adulthood when viewing, say, not safe for work content. An ISP could also construe not safe for work to mean controversial, and to construe that to mean a certain political perspective, and thus make it more difficult to view that sort of content. It could also promote a certain voice that it politically agrees with over others. It could also decertify certain political figures it dislikes to make them harder to find online. It could, in other words, create new choke points or bottlenecks on the internet. And the other companies that currently do this don't want the added competition. Her fifth claim is that a few unelected FCC officials shouldn't be making vast determinations about the future of the internet. Well, this is the height of irony because it was the FCC that passed net neutrality under Title II in the first place just 2 years ago, and mind you, she voted for it. So the members of the FCC were chosen by the same method in 2015 as they were chosen today. I guess it's okay to make determination about the future of the internet if her party is in charge, but not if the other party. As for transparency, which I think is relevant to democratic principles, back when the first net neutrality order was passed, it was done mostly in secret. The actual wording of the regulation, ironically named the Open Internet Order, was a couple hundred pages, was kept secret until after the FCC vote. The current commissioner had the decency, Ajit Pai is his name, to publish his plan for repeal a month in advance of the vote. Her sixth point is that only the rich lobbyists and lawyers of Washington, D.C. Support the repeal of net neutrality. And there's some truth to this. Netflix, Google, and Facebook, for instance, have all supported net neutrality vocally. But they also have lobbyists and lawyers, as do Comcast and Infinity. The sort of Marxian rhetoric of the class and the few versus the many here is inappropriate for this issue, where it's really just one section of industry opposing another, and they're trying to get a policy that favors their side of the industry as opposed to the other. However, one side seems to have a better PR campaign, and they also have the added benefit that capitalizing on an anti-capitalist mentality seems to be rather effective right now. I'm not radically partisan on the issue of net neutrality. I just thought it was worthy of comment that a member of the FCC, one of five, supposed to be a technocrat and expert on the subject, wrote a public article that was just riddled with inaccuracies and not a single citation in it. In any case, thanks for watching my video. My name is Hengis Satanta Smoochworth. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and share.